Welcome to the Three Championship Drive podcast on YouTube, hosted by me, Lance Caporossi. Follow me on X at Lance Caporossi, the same way you see it spelled on the screen. Do us a favor, hit the subscribe button, like the video, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan. We got our first guest on the show, Steve from the Rez Ball Pod. Steve, I'm going to give you a minute to introduce yourself and tell people where to find you.
So Yate Steve Pelletier She Mai Dishkis initially Bilagana Bashin Kingla Chini Dasha Che Bilagana Dashanala. That's how I introduce myself on every episode of the Rez Ball Pod. If you don't know, I'm Danae. It's called Rez Ball because I'm native and basketball is a big part of native culture. It's my love letter to how I grew up and playing Rez Ball, which is basically like fast break basketball. But on the Rez Ball Podcast, I'm joined every week by Andy, aka a data-driven Piston fan. You can find him on Twitter at D_D_Piston_fan. We do a weekly Pistons pod, but I really started the Rez Ball pod as an NBA draft podcast just because I'm NBA draft obsessed. And I also do that with my guy Jam Hines, who writes for Sports Illustrated. He's a scout himself, and he writes for Draft Digest. Go follow all of his stuff too at Jam on the Boards on Twitter. Go read all his stuff on Draft Digest. He's about to put something out about Quentin Post. We try and post one Piston pod, one draft pod every week. So try and post it twice. And again, I'm Steve. You can follow me at Rez Ball Pod. Look at Rez Ball wherever you can find your podcast, Google, Apple. It's on YouTube now, but honestly, YouTube's not exactly friendly with the transfer system. I don't know if y'all guys know that, but yeah, it's everywhere you can find your podcast, Rez Ball.
And I will drop the links in all of the descriptions for you, Andy, and Jamo. I'm just going to call him Jamo. So I will drop everybody's links, I promise, in there. And you'll also be able to find the Rez Ball Pod in the description as well. But we'll get into this. And Zach, I mean, you're looking really anxious right now to talk to Steve. So you've been kind of quiet the entire time. We were talking for like 15 minutes before we went on, just listening, take it all in like the young apprentice that you are, which I do appreciate. But let's get into this. So, Steve, we're going to start with you. I want to know your 5 at 5 in this year's 2024 NBA draft.
So at number 5, it's an annual tradition. The Pistons pick an NBA draft at number 5. It's just going to happen every year now and get used to it. My number 1 overall pick still is Ron Holland. I know people don't really feel enthused with Ron Holland. We can get into this more as we do like individual breakdowns. I also have Reed Sheppard here up high. I have Reed Sheppard number 3 overall on there. I know it might be a little weird taking another guard, but I mean, who's the last guy you remember who shot over 50% from 3 all season? I can wait and hear who that is later. Cody Williams is the next guy I have for the 5 at 5. Again, lanky, like 6'7", 6'8", around 190, 180, 7'1" wingspan. Really good driver and finisher to the basket. Shooting concerns, but you got to bet on wings. It's I forget who originally said this, but they're like the last great Piston wing was Tayshaun, and I'm like, oh my gosh, they are right about that. Like this team has just neglected wings for too long. Then we have Zaccharie Risacher, probably the safest pick. He does what exactly everybody wants. He's around 6'8", 6'9". He shoots threes. He's a pretty good defender. Doesn't really have like much upside in terms of like creation and other things, but Otto Porter is kind of the comp that I give, like that Otto Porter role where you're like, you don't see him as like any more than number 3, but he works and he supplements and he's exactly what like a Cade and an Ivey need if that's who you're going to continue to build around. The 5th one, I really have a hard time like narrowing it down to number 5 for like 5 at 5. We can get into this more later, but really it comes down to like 3 guys here, and that's Tyler Smith, forward, stretch forward out of the G League Ignite, like 6'9", 6'10", good shooter, okay shot blocker. Tijan Salon, who's maybe the biggest upside playing here. Again, another like 6'9" kind of combo forward. Super raw, but man, the flashes are so good. They're maybe the best in this class. And then the last guy is Ryan Dunn, who I really like. I know a lot of people are really low. The offense is scary, but the defense is elite.
I like that list. I really do. I mean, you left my man Donovan Clingan off there, but I know why, but that's my guy. I love that you put Zaccharie Risacher at 5, but real quick before I ask Zach his 5 at 5, what are the odds that Zaccharie Risacher actually drops to 5 in your opinion?
I think they're pretty good. I mean, there's too many people out there in draft space from the lockdown NBA draft guys like James Barlow and Richard Stamen, who I just listened to. James is breaking down his, mock draft, most recent mock draft, and he said exactly what I think is like Risacher at 1 to 3 just seems like too rich for my blood because I just said it, you don't have much upside in terms of creation, doing things with the ball in his hands. All of his skill set he flashes is supplementary, so I think at 5 is reasonable. And the guys up at the top too, like Atlanta, like is Atlanta really gonna play it safe and take the number 1 overall dude? Even if they blew it up, that's even more reason to go get this Alex Sarr, or even like a Ron Holland or somebody like that that's shown they can do a lot with the ball in their hands and has way more athleticism than Arisa Shea has. And then the Wizards at number 2. I mean, the Wizards have no center, and they don't have even anybody like a Sarr. Denny like has point ability, and then Bilal Coulibaly looks good, but he's so raw, like nobody really quite knows what he is. And then Spurs at 3, or is it? No, it's Rockets at 3.
Yep, Rockets.
And then Spurs at 4. We can see Risacher going to either one of those spots, but I think it's still pretty good odds that Risacher makes it down to 5, especially if you're just talking about pure upside of like what shows up on film. Upside normally means you can create your own shot, or you can be like a multi-positional defender, and Risacher just doesn't have that kind of tape.
Yeah, I don't think he goes 1 to Atlanta. I think you have to take Alex Sarr. Even if like you're not in love with him, he just has the highest upside in my opinion, based on the guys that could go in the top 2. And probably really throughout the whole draft, just for like, some of the flashes he's shown offensively, but also just the defense that he could potentially bring to a team. And then I'm with you. I can see Risacher going number 2 because it's the Washington Wizards, but like I really don't know how it like all fits together with everybody they have right now, even though I know they're kind of a mess like the Pistons as well. But then Houston at number 3, I mean, I don't know. I think they probably would look for like Reed Shepherd makes the most sense to me at number 3 for Houston just because of that shooting. They need someone to open space up. But I am afraid of San Antonio taking Risacher because I think he would be an excellent pairing in that maybe that 4 spot next to Wemby. So I don't know, but 5, that would be really cool. I didn't put him on my list at 5, and I'll get into it in a few minutes, but Risacher would be like the dream pick, in my opinion, at number 5 for the Detroit Pistons. It just makes a ton of sense to fit alongside what we got going in Detroit right now.
Yeah, every year I always do this list of like, you can't be mad at this pick, and Risacher's probably at the top of that. Yeah. Like, you just can't be mad at it because he's exactly what the Pistons are looking for, tall wing that can shoot and defend.
Yep. But Zach, who are your 5 at 5?
Well, so I agree with Steve. Risacher, if he can fall to 5, that's a win. Like it's a no-brain pick. Now, if it happens, it's highly unlikely. I think he's right that San Antonio can't miss with that pick, so I don't think he's going to fall. But I do have him on my list. Also have Reed Shepherd, Kentucky guard with the shooting ability, is incredible. You can't pass up on Reed Shepherd he is 6'3", but he is super young. He does shoot the ball very well. I like the way he plays. I like his release. I think he could fit really well on a wing next to Cade. I think that he would be a good partner and have a good, finally have someone reliable to shoot the ball at guard with him. And then I also have Cody Williams as well. Cody Williams brings so much. The size is great with what he brings to the table at 6'7", I think it is, 6'7", 180. I think he fits really well in this group. And as you talked about, I think I was the one, I don't know if it was me or Lance talking about Tayshaun Prince. Tayshaun Prince, I fell in love with him, and we do lack size. We haven't brought in a wing that resembles something Tayshaun had with that bad boy type team in the 04 Pistons. And I think that's something we're missing. We haven't had that 3 guy that is a lockup, that guy can move really well, that's lengthy. Because, man, Tayshaun Prince, I think his arms were longer than his height. It was incredible, like the way that he defended on the floor. He played so well with what he was given. So I do have Cody Williams there. Also Ron Holland. Ron Holland's not a miss. I think Ron Holland is a surefire pick if he's there at 5. A lot of people like him. I don't think you can pass up on a Ron Holland. I think his upside's way too high. Now, bringing him into a situation with maybe the lack of coaching of Monty Williams, or maybe not being able to put him in the right role, maybe he isn't successful in Detroit, but we don't know. But it's something that we can't not take a shot at with Ron Holland. And then last, I have Donovan Clingan. I know that it's probably not a good way to go. Steve might get me for this one, but I think Donovan Clingan, with his success in college and his size, I think he'd be a great fit on this team, whether we decide to keep what we have or we go ahead and make some trades and move some pieces around. I think bringing him in as a young center at 7'2", I think that would be incredible with him. I think he has great ball skills and he can finish well at the rim. So that's my 5. Basically the same. Risacher would be obviously the big win if we could somehow make that happen. But with trading up for anything this year is not something that I don't think we should do, because I think that'd be just a waste in picks, because we're going to have to give more than what we're going to receive out of it. So unfortunately, being the team that drafts only at 5 for the next 27 years, I think Risacher would be a great luxury, but hopefully we maybe can hit a Ron Holland at 5.
Man, we keep bringing up Ron Holland, and I don't know. I really do like Ron Holland a lot. We'll get into it in a second, though. But I find it odd, though, that there's all those reports where he's working out for like Miami, because it looks like he's going to drop out of the lottery. Steve, do you think there's a chance that Ron Holland actually does drop out of the top 14 in this year's draft?
No, only because I think Danny Ainge at 9 is sitting there wringing his hands like, yeah, because that's exactly the kind of pick that he would look at. I mean, Ron Holland's profile is very similar to Jaylen Brown, super athletic. Shooting concerns are there. Like, you could give him multi-positional defensive versatility. He can pass a little. He can generate free throws. That's the Danny Ainge type of swing that he takes. And he's like, I just got time anyway. I got Lowry. I got Colin Sexton. I have dudes that can protect him with shooting too.
Yeah.
And I just like the way they run that offense in Utah. They don't just rely on one person. The ball is constantly moving. Guys are making cuts. Like, it is a beautiful way to play basketball.
Yeah, I mean, Ron's just going to push that pace even more in that team in the West. All those older teams in the West are going to be like, oh gosh, I've got to face Utah tonight.
Man, I'm glad we're all on the same page about Ron Holland. But my 5 at 5, I have Reed Sheppard. He'd be number 1. Like, after Zaccharie Risacher, I think this guy would be just incredible to pair with Cade, Jaden, Ivey, whoever's on this team at that point. And I think, is it Steve Kerr that shot 50% from 3 in college? Is that who I'm thinking of? Or
probably. I mean, you got to go way back, though. I'll look it up, but I'm pretty sure you're right.
I was just taking a guess because he was one sniper at Arizona State, I believe, or Arizona. But anyways, Reed Sheppard number 1, Donovan Clingan number 2, just because the Pistons really need a defensive anchor. And I mean, I don't think he plays 30 minutes right away his rookie year. I think you're probably looking at like 24 minutes, probably the Walker Kessler treatment for a couple seasons until he truly develops. So I think there's a world or a universe where even if you draft Donovan Clingan at number 5, you can still play Jalen Duren. And, I mean, it probably is not great for Jalen Duren in the long end of things or whatever, but Donovan Clingan, I really like his defensive potential in the NBA. I think for a couple seasons you could definitely play those two on the same team, maybe not together on the floor, but on the same team for sure. I got Ron Holland at number 3. Then I got Buzelis at number 4, because even though I do want the Pistons to pass on Buzelis, dude, just that Andre Karolinko to his game. It's just, I really loved Andre Karolinko when I was a kid. I thought he was amazing. I love the 5-for-5 stuff he could do. 5 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 blocks, 5 steals. And I see that with Buzelis. And then at 5, I have Cody Williams. I really like his game a lot too. And it's just one of those guys that he's one of those guys I'd be afraid to play against every single year, because even though he looked, I guess, a little timid at Colorado, he was playing with 2 other NBA prospects, and I could get it towards the end of the season. Maybe you're not playing for a national championship or even a deep NCAA tournament run, so you're going to start playing for yourself a little bit more. And he's probably just like, look, I'm projected to go in the lottery. I'm good. Let you guys do what you need to do. I don't know. But those are my 5 at 5 for the Detroit Pistons. So how are we all feeling about our list? Like, I mean, are we all feeling pretty good about it?
I was going to put Buzelis in mine. I was going to, but then I decided not to. I had him in there, and I ended up replacing him with Donovan Clingan. I just think Donovan Clingan's be a better fit for the Pistons because Buzelis, like we've said, his shooting can be a little wishy-washy at times. And I feel like that's not something you want to bring into the NBA because once you start missing shots, I think your confidence is just shot. And then if you start missing shots for Monty Williams, we all saw what happened to Jaden Ivey. It went downhill really fast. So I don't know Buzelis if he comes onto that team and he doesn't perform as much as they want him to do. Like he's not a B plus. He's a C minus grade playing in the NBA. I think it just unfortunately like downfalls very fast.
Interesting. I mean, I'm kind of with you on Buzelis just a little bit. I feel like his skill set right now without the shooting, the team's just not set up for the type of defense he could potentially bring to the team right now. I know the Pistons need it, and I know some guys are infatuated with his 2 blocks per game in the G League Ignite, but he's also like a 6'8" wing. I don't know how many blocks he's going to actually get in the NBA. There's going to be a steep learning curve. Maybe he could be like kind of like a Sar Thompson where he was just filling up the stat sheet, early on in the season and looking real good. But who knows? Buzelis, I do like what he can bring to the team, but also I just don't think the Pistons are really set up for his skill set right away.
Well, that's what concerns me is he's just the same skill set as Sar Thompson, and we just have 2 of them now. So I just don't want to overwhelm the Pistons with 2 guys that are just we kind of resort to a little bit more athleticism than we do purity of playing basketball. So that's how I look at it. I don't think he'd be a horrible pass up, but I just don't think he fits the system that we have.
So let's get on to the most sense and the best fit out of I don't know if you guys want to go. I have a name that I didn't put in my top 5, but I'm going to talk about him anyways, because I think it's a different question. And, maybe I don't have him in my top 5, but I see how he fits to this team because there's a glaring hole at this skill that the Pistons lack, and he definitely brings it. But Steve, I'll start with you again. Who makes the most sense and who is the best fit out of, the prospects in the 2024 NBA draft?
So to me, I always think if all things were considered, if it was just Cade, like there's been these things of like, oh, do you build around just Cade? Do you try and move like some of the other guys for a veteran? Do you try and like package everything for the pick? I've been thinking of it in terms of like, okay, if it was just Cade, like who would I pick? And the answer is Reed Sheppard because Reed pretty much fits everything you want, over 50% from 3. I don't know that he's exactly like the on-ball defender that can work day in and day out, night in and night out to defend point guards, but I believe in his athleticism. I mean, he had some of the best athletic testing numbers. He tied the record with a couple guys there at the combine with a 42-inch vertical, and that's part of the reason why he had so many blocks as a guard. He just, snatches up a bunch of steals, and it's more the feel type of thing where you're like, oh, he's in the right position all the time. Oh, look, he just knows what to do. And, I remember I saw Sam Vecini put out this tweet, maybe like end of February, beginning of March, where he was saying there's some NBA scouts that were giving Reed the Steve Nash comps. And I thought that was like, that's too much. But if you look at freshman Steve Nash's numbers and freshman Reed's numbers, freshman Reed clears him on a lot of different things. And that's not to say like Steve Nash is going to be who Reed turns into. Yeah. But again, everything else is really rare. True shooting percentage is like 69.9%. He missed it he was averaging 70% true shooting all year and missed it just by 0.1%. But 52.1% from 3 on legitimate volume, cares on defense. That's exactly what the team needs. And the other wings that could like be the best sense or most fit, they have something in there that knocks them out of being the best sense and the most fit. Even Risacher, to be quite honest, even though he is fine, I think man-to-man defense, I don't exactly see him like being a Tayshaun in that regard, where he's athletic enough and laterally quick enough to be the man-to-man. Like the Jaden McDaniels. Jaden McDaniels for me is the ideal like Cade wing defender type of guy, where you're like, yes, he can defend 3s and 4s, even all the way up to like Kevin Durant. Nobody's stopping him, but he frustrates him. I mean, Jaden McDaniels is one of the first guys that gave Luka trouble just with that length and athleticism. Like you don't really see that with Risacher. You see him work definitely both him and Reed are some of the top guys in terms of never quitting and just always selling out on every single play and giving maximum effort. But athletically, Risacher is limited. And I would love to put like Cody Williams or Ron Holland here. But again, they both have shooting concerns. Cody doesn't shoot enough. He shot a good percentage, over 40%, but it's on incredibly low volume. It's under 2 per game. And then Ron, not exactly glowing stats here. He took enough, but he only shot 24% on 3.3 attempts per game. So, it is what it is. So it is Reed Sheppard, just because if it was just Cade and you're looking at it from that perspective, you're like, yes, take the guy that is locked in on defense, gets a bunch of blocks and steals, and shoots over 50% from 3.
Yep.
He makes a lot of sense, though, with Jaden Ivey as a guy that can drive and kick. Well, Jaden Ivey can drive and kick. I mean, I know he doesn't have the playmaking chops. I mean, I think sometimes his assist numbers.
No. I think Ivey does. Like, Ivey's one of the
Yeah.
best drive and kick guys I ever saw coming out of the draft.
Oh, okay.
It's mind-boggling to me why that hasn't been a stable part of the Pistons offense. Like, they should just spam that until teams figure it out, because Ivey's a walking paint touch. And if you can figure out a way to do like a screen at half court when you're pushing up the court in transition, like, you can do stuff like that too. So yeah, that makes sense. I just worry about the size. Like, if you run Cade, Ivey, and Reed together, that's a small sort of 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that would be kind of crazy to do. But I mean, I like Reed's, fit with Cade, Jaden Ivey, and kind of like Quentin Grimes too, I guess. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it just, because I do believe in Reed Sheppard defensively, because I think those athletic tools will carry over. But with all of his combine stats and his college stats, do you think we're overthinking Reed Sheppard? Because on paper, he looks like honestly kind of like the best prospect in the 2024 NBA draft. I know the shooting won't carry over. Like, he's not going to shoot 52% from 3 in the NBA. I mean, that's just insane to even think about. Like, that's just crazy. But I feel like we're overthinking it a little bit with Reed Sheppard. Like, I feel like we're not everybody, but I feel like a lot of people are trying to find holes and nitpick his game, where he just kind of makes sense for a lot of different teams. And I fully expect him to go within one of the top 3 picks in the NBA draft.
He's the short white boy, man. That's why everybody overthinks him. I mean, come on, keep it real, right? But I think him and Rob, like, this is the year where the Kentucky guard thing is being tested to the max. Because Rob, it's the same thing. Like, if he were 6'3" and like 200, there would be more people going to bat for him. But he's like 6'1" and like maybe $150, right?
Yep.
$160, somewhere in there. But it's a long lineage of Kentucky guards now that we've seen: Emmanuel Quickly, Tyrese Maxey, Devin Booker. These dudes just work out. So I don't think it's necessarily overthinking, because I think Reed's still being mocked at like number 3, right? Yeah. I just think for the Pistons, it just sucks, because we're stuck in this position where we want to still believe in the young guys, but 14 wins screams like you have to do something else. And so I think the Piston fans in general are overthinking what to do, because there's so many things potentially you could do. And we've just been burned too many times on, moving on from a player before they really reached their peak. And I think that's what it is with Reed, is like, we don't want to move on from Ivey yet. We don't want to move on from Quentin Grimes, because we barely know what he is. And that's not necessarily like what has to happen with Reed, but it's implied. It's heavily implied.
I was thinking of this too, because I was watching some of his highlights, and either of you can answer this. And it might be I like making comparisons for players and prospects and everything. And when I was watching him a little bit, does he remind you just a little bit of like Ben Gordon from Connecticut before he got to the NBA? He doesn't remind you at all. Okay, then I'm just crazy.
No, Ben was a gunner, and Reed is more of like supplementary. I'm gonna get people involved while also putting up threes. My comp for Reed is Kyle Lowry. And shout out to my buddy Scott. He originally gave him the Kyle Lowry comp, because he's like, Reed's got a fat ass for a white boy, and he takes those charges away. Kyle Lowry does. And I was like, that's actually pretty spot on. And the more I've watched him, the more I'm like, yeah, that's who I would say Reed Sheppard is Kyle Lowry, where just put up a ton of threes, super feisty on defense. He's always a net positive, even when he's like 40 years old on this Philly squad.
Yeah, I guess you're right. Ben Gordon was a gunner, but man, I loved watching him at UConn. And I don't know. I guess maybe the highlights I was checking out, it just reminded me a little
What's
bit
wrong with
more
you as a
like it.
Piston fan? You and your Darko and Ben Gordon love. Get out of
Yeah,
here.
dude.
You're telling me, man.
whoa, dude. If the Pistons had used Ben Gordon a little bit differently, I think it would have turned out a little differently in Detroit. But they tried to make him into a point guard, and he definitely was not that.
This podcast brought to you by Joe Dumars.
Dude, he was ahead of his time. Okay, Charlie Villanueva. He was a shooting big. It should have worked out, but he couldn't guard a folding chair. But Zach, who is your most sense best fit for the Detroit Pistons at 5?
Oh shit, Ben Gordon, bro. But hey, I used him in 2K, man. He jumped like 20 feet in the air when he shot the ball. It was incredible.
I loved him, dude. I loved him.
I'm gonna unfortunately, I'm gonna agree with Steve. The most sense is Reed Sheppard by a long shot. When we did this, when I first started doing this with you, we did basically all those intros to all these draft picks, and we wanted to talk about them and what they bring to the table and what they are as a player. And the first thing I saw with Reed Sheppard is how high he jumped on his release and how fast his release was as a shooter. Just looking at that, not knowing the stats behind him, not knowing what he did at Kentucky at all, I could have just watched this guy shoot the ball 10 times and not know one little thing about him. And then you give me the statistics of him shooting 50% from 3. It's over. It's already game over. The guy's release is perfect. It's smooth. He does lack his size, but that's where he makes up in his vertical. So I don't think any of these guys really are a fit, because if we want to start building around Cade, we've talked about that 100 times. We keep trying to draft kind of a new star to run a new direction when really we have one guy that we're focusing on and we need to build around him. This is the guy that we can use to build around him. We can use him just primarily as a 3-point shooter. Like, you're going to come to this team. This is what we need you to be the best at. This is what we need you to focus on. And I think that brings it'll spread the court out a lot for Cade to work a little bit. Even Jaden Ivey, if they decide to keep him and do what they want. Now, putting all 3 of them on the court at the same time, that's going to be a negative. We're not going to do that. The size would be, there's even no way to adjust it. Now, Monty might do it. Monty actually might, because his little notes that he got, who knows, it might say these guys are the best. But when it comes to fitting in the lineup, he could be a 6-man when he starts. If we somehow get a hold of him, could be a 6-man. But I could also see him starting in the future. I think this guy has a lot of upside. I like the way he shoots the ball. And like I said, his vertical on his jump shot makes up for his lack of size. And I think he can grow as a defender, because Kentucky guards, man, they get at it. And I think him playing with Rob, I think that'll show a lot coming into the NBA. So he doesn't worry me one bit. Now, is he going to fall to 5? Probably not. But if he does, I think that's our go-to.
Okay. I mean, Reed Sheppard's my most sense best fit as well, but I'm going to go in a little different direction. I'm going to go Dalton Knecht, just because he is, I know a lot of people don't like him, but just because he is a shooter, he's a movement shooter. He can score the ball. The Pistons definitely need another guy that can create his own shot, and that's what you're getting from Dalton Knecht. And I mean, again, I don't love it. I really don't. But in terms of what he can bring on the offensive end and what the Pistons need on this team, if Reed Sheppard's not there at 5 or Zaccharie Risacher is not there at 5, Dalton Knecht does make the most sense. If you think your biggest need is shooting and offensive creation, Dalton Knecht brings that probably better than almost anybody in this draft. So Dalton Knecht would be my guy at the best fit. And if you want to disagree with me, that's totally fine. I love to hear your notes on Dalton Knecht as well, Steve, because I love the way you break this all down. So feel free to break down Dalton Knecht for me.
Well, Knecht, I agree that he'd fit, but as you and I talked about, and you talked about it on your show too before, when you said the history of guys 23 years or older in the draft, it's not a great track record. I mean, you went all the way back to Kenyon Martin.
Yep.
And normally, and I looked at it like 22 years and older. It's like Damian Lillard, Kemba Walker, Cam Johnson. I think Cam Johnson was like 23. And that's kind of the pick that I would think about, is like, you like Cam Johnson, but there are still better players than Cam Johnson in that draft. And the more I've watched Dalton Knecht, the more he reminds me of Swaggy P, Nick Young. Like, their games are pretty similar. They're athletic dude that can shoot threes, always is a bucket. Like, his talent is never at question, but like defensively, I'm not so sure. And in terms of like self-creation, Dalton Knecht's not creating for others. I mean, he averaged under 2 assists per game at Tennessee. That's the big part of it too. Like that combined with the defense, I would rather swing on somebody like Cody Williams, because what Cody has is you saw a really good man-to-man defense on guys like Isaiah Collier, who's, you know, one of the more athletic dudes in this draft, you know, did great defensively on him. And then he finished like 78% of his shots at the rim. As handles, like pretty basic, but there's that. And then he shot well, even though it was low volume. And really, when you look at like Cody's overall profile, you're like, you know what? He just needs to shoot it okay. Whereas with Dalton, you're like, oh, he's got to get better as a defender. He's not really going to be a passer. And like, am I really going to rely on him to be a top 3 offensive option? The answer is probably not.
I got a player comp for him. And you tell me if I'm right or wrong. Wally Szczerbiak.
Oh, come on, man. Why you got to do the skin tone compared to complexion comparisons?
I
could see it, but Wally was bulkier because Wally was like 240, 230, right?
Yeah.
And I think Wally was a little bit more, what's a generous way I can say? He was less
girthy,
mobile.
Oh,
he wasn't as
mobile,
fluid as, and again, that's why I say Swaggy P, because you never say he was unathletic, but you also saw there were times where he didn't quite leverage his athleticism as well as he should. So yeah, I think Dalton would be peak Wally in a foot race and athletic testing, 10 times out of 10 for sure. Maybe like Pat Connaughton if you wanted to do like complexion comparison, something more than that, probably somewhere in between those.
I've seen some comparisons like Allen Houston, and I'd have to go back and watch Allen Houston just a little bit more. I know they're both the Tennessee guys, but I don't know. Like Pat Connaughton is pretty interesting. What about like Tyler Hero though? Like, is the athleticism the same between those two, or is
because Tyler Hero like can handle more, and he was a creator for sure, and he still does that with Miami, running second units and stuff. He's not a point guard, but he's close. So on.
Well, I'm 0 for 2 on the player comps, but we will definitely, I'm going to nail at least one of these during this.
Well, like, hold on. I just want to talk about Knecht too. Like, isn't bringing someone on the team that doesn't pass the ball like that okay? Because it's not like we're going to make him if he passes it to one of our guys off the bench anyway. So, I mean, bringing a guy like maybe Dalton Knecht to come off the bench just as a primary scorer, I don't know if it would be a bad thing.
I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think it's just one more thing in the profile that when you look at him compared to the other guys that could be available at 3, you're like, okay, he's actually deficient in that area. And if you're picking top 5, you want to find the guy with like a more well-rounded skill set that you could at least say, hey, maybe one day they'll turn into like a third option, like a Tobias Harris or like a Gary Trent Jr., and especially in this draft class, it's so fluid and there's not a lot of guys that people are really trying to sell it in terms of even being like a number 2 option. I think if you look at it in terms of like Risacher and Dalton Knecht, like Risacher, it's pretty easy to be like, okay, he's like an Otto Porter type, like I said before, like that's an easy thing to see. But even Otto Porter like was number 3 every single night when he played with Wall and he played with Beal because he knew how to play off of those guys. Dalton Knecht was the man. Whereas Risacher already knows how to fit into a role in a professional team in the French league who's playing in the playoffs. I mean, they've relied on him to be their primary defender, and they've relied on him to be one of the primary floor spacers. So that's like a big difference between somebody like a Knecht. And not to say like he can't transition into a role player easily, but you factor in, okay, the history of 23-year-old guys taken in the lottery. I mean, I would even go back and say, who's the last 23-year-old guy taken in the top 5? It might be Kenyon Martin.
I think it was.
Yeah. So
does age drop you down like 10 picks of someone just because being a 5th-year senior at Tennessee?
This is where it's hard for me because I hate like just boiling it down to age, and I'm somebody that like age doesn't super factor into the evaluation process, which might seem like counterintuitive here. But what I always say is I think it has to do more with like draft positioning, because when you look at guys like Desmond Bane and Jimmy Butler, like both guys were taken at number 30 overall and turned into really good players. Jimmy's obviously a superstar. I think if they're taking at 5, they probably bounce out of the league in like 4 to 5 years, because when you're taking number 30, you're asked to do just 1 or 2 things. And in Jimmy's case, it was like, oh, you're a really good defender. Cool. We can just throw you out there and let D-Rose and all these other guys. We need you right now, and then they let him, here, do one or two more things, here, do one or two more things. Whereas if you're taking number 5 immediately, like, here's the ball, here's all these things, then the leash is just shorter. It's something, again, I've thought about, and Jam and I will do an episode on, but that probably has more to do with it, is just the readjustment period, probably from being the man at 22, 23 years old to finding your role and then filling out the rest of it is different, I think. And the leash for an older player is much shorter when you're picked up high, because it's like, you're 23 years old. How come you don't have all this figured out already? Whereas if you're 18, 19 years old, he's just a kid, man. Give him time.
Yeah. And me and Lance talked about it too, is like drafting at 5 with only winning 14 games. We're trying to draft somebody that's an instant impact player for this team. So
I'm looking at Buddy Hield. He was 6th overall, and I think he was 23 when he was drafted, but when he started his rookie year, he was actually 24 years old, and he had a couple seasons. He had 120 points per game season, and it looked like that was his 3rd year in the league. And then he's been a pretty solid pro. I mean, 40% career 3-point percentage on 7.6.
Yeah, let me pull up his college numbers too, because he was somebody I looked at, and he did more creation and other things too, though.
Yeah. He was kind of a gunner, though, too, a little bit in college. Like, I mean, he could get to the rim and everything, but he was just one of those older prospects where it did actually turn out pretty well for him. And I think he's made a pretty good amount of money as well, too, in the NBA. But I don't know if his numbers would be similar to Dalton Knecht. But
so Buddy Hield was 25 points per game, 5.7 rebounds, 2 assists, 1.1 steals, 55.2, 45.7 on 8.7 3-point attempts per game, and then 88% from the free throw line and 5.4 free throw attempts per game. So again, one of those ones that are like, I don't think you can really compare anybody to that.
Yeah,
no.
That kind of stat line, and especially the shooting, 45 and 88 from 3 in the free throw line. Like, nobody's doing that on that volume too.
And his accolades speak for himself too. So no, Buddy Hield was a dog at Oklahoma. He was so much fun to watch.
He was great. He really was. But let's talk about the prospect that we think Detroit Pistons fans will love the most at 5. I mean, I don't know who you guys are going to pick. I'll just start it off real quick. The guy that I think they will love the most was the guy we're just talking about, Dalton Knecht. Like, I think when I read on like Reddit and I see other fans like on social media, whether it's X or whether it's Instagram or on Facebook, Dalton Knecht just seems like the guy Pistons fans won't really complain about if they select him at number 5. It might be a cop-out answer, but I really think that fans will love the Dalton Knecht pick at number 5. Personally, if he's the guy, I'd rather have them trade back and find him somewhere else in the lottery if like he's 100% the guy. But Steve, who do you think is the prospect fans will love the most at 5?
Well, I want to hear Zach's answer first, because mine's a little different.
All right, go ahead.
All right, so I put Risacher for love the most if he can drop down to 5, just because yes, we can compare him as much as we want to Langdon, Tayshaun Prince. Yes, understand that he is not what Tayshaun brought to the table, but also maybe could surprise us and could be the elite defender that we need on this team. With his size and his physicality. So I got Risacher. If he drops that far, I think that would be a great pick. I think a lot of people don't watch the overseas, they don't understand, and they don't watch the film on these guys that play overseas. They don't really understand who he is, I think, until he comes and he plays summer league and they realize how big this guy is and what he could mean to this team. But I got Risacher for my love the most fit.
So mine is nobody.
Nobody.
I think the way the fan base is it's so fractured. And calling the number 5 is in one of those spots now where it's like, oh man, there's so many people. Everybody's formed camps already. There's like the small Ron Holland camps. There's the like, well, why not Madas camp? There's the people that are like Risacher. I think Risacher will elicit the least like blowback and the least amount of like fan hate. I think people might be angry at first. There are a few people might be angry at first, but then eventually be like, he's a wing that shoots, whatever. But I don't know that anybody's going to initially like feel great. And if Trajan Langdon, like if his pick history in New Orleans says anything, it's probably going to be like a wing. I mean, they took Jordan Hawkins in the last draft. They've taken Trey Murphy. They've taken Herb Jones. They've also taken what's his face, Kyra Lewis. So, runs the gamut there. I just think with where the fan base is at, there's the side of, like you just said, Dalton Knecht, they want the instant impact. There's that side of the fan base. And there's the other side of the fan base that's like, no, swing for the fences, get the highest upside drafts. So if you go one way or the other, then you're going to piss somebody off. It's pissed quite a bit of people off.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with you that there's probably I think there will be complaints no matter what, but I'm sticking with my answer, Dalton Knecht. I do think that is the guy that most of the fan base would get behind. Like, I mean,
no, I think there's a lot of the fan base that would hate it.
I
I speak with a lot of them on a
Yeah.
day-to-day basis, to be perfectly honest. Andy has hated it. All the,
Yep.
the dudes in the Slack chat have hated it. If you go over like DBB and the fan posts there are quite a few people that hate it. That's my point. I think like the people in the individual like player camps like camp out in certain spots. Like the people that like Knecht are on Reddit. The people that like Ron or somewhere else.
No, and I mean, I agree with you. I think there is a good amount of the fan base, like you were talking about, that will absolutely despise this pick no matter what. But I'm talking about the guys that more like they're like more of the box score, fans, where they see like the numbers and they're like, oh, those are kind of gaudy. Those are kind of nice. He does the one thing the Pistons need, and it's shooting, and he can create his own shot, and he dunks the ball. Like, look at him. He can throw it down pretty hard. Like, those type of fans are who I'm more after. Like, the guys that really dig deep into this stuff and they love doing what we're doing right now, talking about these prospects, watching film on them, digesting as much as we possibly can. I think the guys like us won't love the pick. Like, I think no matter what, no matter who it is, I don't think I'm going to fall in love with anybody at number 5. But I think that the fan bases that, we cater to, those are the guys that are going to love, I think those guys are going to love the Dalton Knecht one. And I think followed by, it'd probably be Booz Ellis. He'd probably be number 2, because some of the fans I've talked to on like Instagram and stuff like that, they have been big on Booz Ellis, and like I've gotten a lot of comments my way about Booz Ellis where everybody thinks I'm dead wrong for not wanting him at number 5. But those are just my 2 answers, Dalton Knecht and Booz Ellis, who I think the guys will love the most. I loved your answer though, Steve. I think you are right. I think there is all these camps, in Pistons social media and Pistons fandom where, like nobody's set on one guy. And yeah, I do agree with that a lot. So I like your answer as nobody.
I know now. I know why you made me go before you. I actually almost said nobody. It was close, but I decided
I was
to go,
because then I was like,
it was really close because I get where you're coming from. It's just right now we're in purgatory, man. Like we can't do the right thing. We're constantly doing the right thing. We're grabbing the wrong guys. I tell Lance all the time about system. Like it's with these guys, they're all good players. They're all obviously in the lottery. They're all in the NBA draft. They can play. Like they're ballers, every single one of them. Now, whoever we pick, they have to be systematic with Detroit. Like that's how they're going to be successful. You put them on this team. You can't put them on a team where you're going to be asking them to do something they have no idea what the hell they're doing. So when it comes down to it, it's just we got to draft a guy that is a fit, that wants to be where he's at. It knows he's going to be on a struggling team and has to want to play at an elite level. And at 5, it just really fucking sucks because we just keep getting hit with 5. We can't make a decision. Like we should have Wembanyama, and I don't even care. Like it should be here, but it's not, and we're just dealing with it. So I agree with your nobody. We don't know. No one knows. We can make it. Doesn't matter what this pick is. If it doesn't fit, then we're all going to be upset like normal. If it's mid, we're still going to be upset like normal. But if it's finally a grand slam and we finally hit somebody perfect, then the fan base is like, all right, now we actually know what we're doing. And with Trajan being in charge, I agree completely. I think we're going to be looking at a wing. Like, I think that's what we're going to be doing. He's very known for it. So, but at the end of the day, man, it's fit. It's fit with coaching staff. It's fit with how we play. It's fit with the organization. So we won't know until whoever we decide to take that pick at 5. The fans probably will all be upset no matter what. Doesn't matter because we can't make them happy. And why should we be happy? We're a 14-win team. I'm not happy. Doing this sucks. Like, talking about a team that doesn't win, like, that sucks. Like, but we need to turn it around, and hopefully Trajan is the saving grace to that.
Yeah, and sorry, one more thing on this, because I didn't know where to bring it up, but I think it's here. Like, Monty factors into all of this.
Yes.
Which is part of, like, why I say nobody will be happy. Because, like, say Reed gets picked, and then they move on from Ivey, then there's going to be, the Ivey contingent that hates Reed immediately. And honestly, I would be one of them, because that's what I hope doesn't happen, is, like, Monty gets in the way of actually developing players. Because we saw he's the main reason for the 14 wins, holding Cade out in the last 2 minutes of, like, winnable games, letting Duran be, like, the point guard and bring the ball up the court, making Jaden Ivey a corner 3-point shooter, telling Asar to launch away from 3 for, like, 5 games and then not playing him and then putting him out there in the dunker spot for the next 20 or whatever. Yeah. Like, that's part of it too. Like, even if there's a pick that you're like, yeah, I can see the upside, but then you're like, oh man, is Monty even going to play him?
This is true. So I did run a poll on YouTube. I haven't got any votes yet, but hopefully by the end of this, I at least get a couple votes so we can see who the fan base would love. So I guess the question, maybe it could have been just reworded like, who will be the prospect most fans least complain about, at number 5? And maybe that would have been a better question to ask. But let's move on to this one. Which prospect fans will hate the most at number 5? Because there's definitely going to be hate. We're not going to please everybody. But Steve, I'll turn it over to you first if you want to take over on this one. Who do you think fans will hate the most at number 5?
He's going to say everyone.
This one I do think there's an answer for. It's probably Ron or Matas Pozelis, probably Ron Holland, only because he doesn't shoot, and they're going to be like, he just profiles too much similar to Asar, a super athletic guy that can do good things with the ball, but he shot 24% from 3. So yeah, there'll be that. And then Matas, like, I'll be pretty much leading the pitchfork charge for Matas, because you just laid out, we need shooting, we need a wing, we need defense. The people selling people on Matas are like, look at the shot blocks, 1.9 per game in 34 games with the G League Ignite, which is pretty good. And honestly, he crashed the boards pretty good too. 6.6 rebounds, over 200 or 225 in total, which showed toughness. And blocks is an effort stat. I forget who originally told me that, and that shows the effort that Matas put throughout. But the accolades end right there. 45.5% from the entire field, 26.1% from 3-point range, and then 69.6%, which, by the way, is worse than his teammate Ron Holland. Ron Holland shot 72.4% from the free throw line. And Matas is about 6'8", 6'9". He weighed in at like 196, 197 at the combine. You're telling me that, like, you're supposed to sell the fan base on a guy that was supposed to be 6'10", who's not 6'10", who profiles best as a 4, who doesn't shoot well from 3 or from the free throw line, and he's supposed to be a good shot blocker at under 200 pounds. Like, it just doesn't all add up. I think that's the one that, like, the more you would dive into it, the more it would be like, hey, look what he did in high school. And there would be more people. And leading up to the draft, people looking into Matas. And then, of course, there's the, like, Arn Tellem connection, that Arn's son is Matas's agent. People that, want to, prognosticate or whatever about the connection between Arn, that he somehow has sway over what the Pistons do. Like, that part of the fan base is going to be incredibly angry.
Yeah, that nepotism likes to be thrown out a lot when you're talking to Pistons fans. But I agree with you. I think the prospect the fans will hate the most is Ron Holland. And from firsthand experience, I made a clip and I put it on Instagram, I think like a week ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, I'm not sure, talking about Ron Holland as another topic we'll get to here in a second. And I'm still getting messages from people talking about, why would you want to draft Ron Holland? He can't shoot. It's like, well, it's everything else he does. And if you bring in more spacing this offseason, I think you're going to love the pick a lot more, because, like, that dude, he can score in space. I mean, he led the G League Ignite in scoring, I think, with 19 a game. Like, he can just do a lot. I love his athleticism. I love his burst towards the rim. I love his finishing at the rim. He's very creative around there. But also, I think his shooting woes like we were talking about before we started recording, was because he wasn't playing with really a point guard that could set him up and put him in a good position. And this is something I love about Cade's game. And when I was on your podcast, the Rez Ball Podcast, we were talking about Zach Levine and Brandon Ingram, where when they were playing with like legit point guards, those guys were putting them in a position to get higher percentage shots. And I think Cade can do that for a guy like Ron Holland. Now, I don't know if his 3-point shooting will drastically change his first year in the NBA, but I think playing with a guy that can set the table and put the ball in the right position will help out tremendously. So even though I think fans would hate Ron Holland at 5, I personally would really love the pick because I think he's a very special player. I'm going to throw the player comp to you right now, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. And that is Toronto Raptors Tracy McGrady. That's kind of what I see from him a little bit when I watch him play.
A little bit, but I always hesitate like trying to give comps to all-time greats. So it's something I wouldn't do. If you want to do it, go right ahead, because I can see athletically there, probably a little bit behind in terms of ball skills, but yeah, athletically for sure. I don't want to put that like, out there ever.
Well, that's why I said Toronto Raptors. I didn't say Orlando. I just said the raw prospect of Tracy McGrady, the more defensive-minded guy that's like, I'm going to take a back seat to my cousin and everybody else on this team, and I'm going to grow my game slowly and then, just blossom somewhere else. Hopefully that doesn't happen if Ron Holland's the pick.
Yeah, I was going to say, hopefully it's like keeping Toronto Raptors.
But Zach, who is the prospect you think Pistons fans will hate at number 5?
I'm not going to drag it out. I'm just going to go with what Steve said. Just Buzelis is my guy on there. It's just I think it's a real big swing, and it could be a real big miss, and that would be in a horrible start to the Trajan Langdon era. Going out and grabbing a guy that you don't know, he's super questionable shooting the ball. So I mean, it's no, like, everyone that is not a Pistons fan could look at ESPN stats and realize, why did the Pistons lose so many games? Oh, because they're not scoring a whole lot of points. Well, we probably shouldn't draft a guy that's pretty inconsistent and scoring a lot of points. So I'm just going to run with Buzelis. That's my pick, and I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah, and if you're going to get mad about it, like, think about it. You don't want to get Ron because he can't shoot, but then you're going to talk about the guy that shot just as bad and from the free throw line. And then you're like, oh, we need a wing, and you want to sell the guy that is more of a power forward, and then you want to sell the shot blocking, but he's not a center and he's under 200 pounds. Like, there's just too many things in Maras's profile that everybody else that we've named like trumps him, whether it's fit, whether it's upside. He just has too many holes, and something we'll probably get into here. Like, none of us have faith in the Pistons development right now.
Nope.
Right. You talked about it with the Ron Holland thing. Like, that's just part of it. You can't really bet on that kind of a guy right now. Unfortunately, until the Pistons prove otherwise, it's just hard to make, the case for a guy that needs more development time like that.
So we keep throwing Trajan Langdon's name out. We've done it a few times on this podcast. And I'm just wondering, because I think it's been answered by a few other Pistons podcast hosts as well, content creators. Who do you think is like the most like a Trajan Langdon pick based on how they drafted in New Orleans?
Man, that's a hard one, because if you look at the more recent ones, like Jordan Hawkins,
yeah,
like, he's easily identifiable, because what do the Pelicans need? They need shooting. They need as much shooting as they possibly can, or they need like a point guard. And so Hawkins is easy there. And like Trey Murphy, that was the one that I like when I worked for Piston Powered. I read up this article, like, the Pistons have to trade to get another pick to get Trey Murphy, because 6'9", super athletic, shoots the three, can defend. Like, that just writes itself. It's a mind-boggling to me that Trey Murphy went so low in that draft.
Yeah.
And then Herb Jones, again, defender. I mean, my gut tells me it's like a Cody Williams.
Yeah.
Because Cody Williams kind of embodies a lot of those things, where he has defensive chops and a super long wingspan, 7'1". That's better than Ron. That's better than Maras. That's better than Risacher, from my understanding. I don't know Risacher's exact measurements, but I'm pretty sure it's not 7'1". He has some ball skills, Cody Williams, but the shooting percentage was fine. So that's something he has over Ron, to where Ron might have taken more, but he shot 24%. So with Cody, it's like, okay, maybe we just need to work on the repetitions. And then I hate to bring up like the bloodline stuff because to me it gives into the territory of like talking about humans like racehorses or like breeding dogs or whatever, But in NBA scouting circles, that's always a thing where they're like, oh, they're come from a basketball family, or hey, his brother plays in the league or whatever. So I think Cody Williams is probably what it is because he does have the athleticism like a Trey Murphy there. He does have defensive chops like a Herb Jones, and then he does like a clear skill set and fills the position of need like a Jordan Hawkins for this Pistons team. So I think he's kind of like the balance of all those three things.
Yeah, I always looked at it as like, I don't know how much like Trajan Langdon had in like actually drafting the guys in New Orleans, but based on some of those guys, it seemed like he liked wings or perimeter players with higher upside. And the four that I think kind of fit that mold are Ron Holland, Cody Williams, Boozelis, and Risacher that could all potentially go to number 5. And I think that's why I think, like, even though I've talked about Dalton Knecht a few times, I actually think he's out as a Pistons prospect just because he doesn't, other than the shooting, like, I mean, because you mentioned Jordan Hawkins, I feel like he might be out because he doesn't really fit the mold of what we've seen New Orleans draft the past few seasons. So I think it's one of those 4 guys at number 5. And I think some fans might say Cody Williams is a little bit of a reach at 5, which I don't agree with that at all. I think he's going to be fantastic in the NBA. But I mean, if you could trade down with like a Memphis or a Utah, even though I know you don't like trading with Danny Ainge, but one of those guys and collect an asset and then still draft one of those guys there, that would be great. And yeah, that would be, I don't know. What about you, Zach? Who do you think is like a Trajan Langdon pick?
I'm gonna have to agree with Cody Williams. I think Cody Williams will be the guy but at the end of the day, like this draft is going to be huge because it'll tell us like how we're going to transition in the future. Like, what does Trajan Langdon want to do? Does he want to go with size? Does he want to go with physicality? Does he want to go with shooting? Does he want to build around Cade? Does he want to say, well, fuck Cade, let's draft someone else that can play like Cade? Like, we don't really know. And that's what I think makes this draft so exciting is because you got to get to see the direction that this new organization is going to be moving towards. And I wouldn't have a problem with Cody Williams, but I also wouldn't have an issue with trading back and having someone else fall in our lap instead of maybe reaching at 5. And let's see like what Trajan Langdon wants to do when it comes to giving away any type of essentials that we have moving back in the draft, whether it is picking up just cash at hand or picking up another player or another trade or another draft pick in the future. I just think at 5, but all the guys that we're talking about could all be people that fall close to the end of the lottery or even out of the lottery. So I think with this draft, yes, I agree with Cody Williams being the type of guy that Trajan Langdon would go for in this draft. But I'm more excited to see how we're gonna function. And unfortunately, I think is a new rebuild. Like I know we have our piece, we have the guy that we want to pay. Like it's an incredible amount of money. But like we talked on last podcast, who else are you gonna pay? Like we don't have anybody else. Like we could pay the dancing usher. Like he makes. I mean, honestly, like he gets views and clicks. Like if you want to do that, we could do that at LCA. But like at the end of the day, we have the guy that we want to build around. He has not. There's been no talk of moving him anywhere. There's been more talk of him signing his contract. Let's see how this organization wants to run around Cade Cunningham because that's the goal here. And I think as of all Pistons fans, I haven't met many that want Cade to go. Everybody wants him here. So we're going to keep him. We're going to build around him. I would love to trade back. I would love to grab more assets. I would love to make some different moves in this draft because at 5, I think everything that we want can be found later. So I think 5 is just a huge reach no matter what we do. But I'm excited to see what this organization wants to do going forward.
I got a question for you, Steve, and I heard this on the Pistons Pulse podcast. They had Laz Jackson on the other day when they were recording, and he had said that he heard from, I think it was like Hoops Rumors or something like that, or I don't remember the name where he heard it from, but I guess Trajan Langdon does not really like the prospects coming from the G League Ignite. I don't know if it means this year or maybe he was burned by like Dyson Daniels or something, but like, what are your thoughts on that? Where apparently a GM or a president of basketball operation is just flat out saying, I don't like the prospects coming from this program.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably an evaluator thing. It probably would stem from like Dyson Daniels realizing, like, oh, hey, NBA, we work for the NBA, right? You sold us on this G League Ignite program. I drafted one of your players, and oh, guess what? He's not ready. He's way further behind than I thought he was. I thought you were supposed to be developing an NBA ready player for us. So I could see that. But I mean, if you're not going to name your sources, I don't know. It's all conjecture. And I mean, we haven't even got an introductory press conference from Trajan Langdon, so we have no idea what he even is going to say, let alone think.
Okay, so the next topic, by the way, great answer. I just wish I remembered where he said he heard that from. But, anyways, this next prospect, I like to call it the Donovan Mitchell Award, the guy that we're afraid to pass on, the guy
The
that
Devin Booker, Donovan
yeah,
Mitchell.
yes, exactly. The Devin Booker, the Donovan Mitchell, the guys we should have drafted. But who is the prospect you are afraid to pass on at number 5?
I mean, we've talked about him before. We talked about Ron. We talked about Cody Williams. I mean, Cody's just got a lot of potential. Again, he's got the wingspan the others don't. He can actually handle the ball, and the way he finishes, if he just shoots it well from 3 on a legitimate volume, that's a really useful guy. I don't think he's going to be like tops, but I think I said this before we started recording. Jaden McDaniels is like my Cade wing defender, and you could see a world in which Cody becomes that with that wingspan. And just his ability to handle physicality on both ends. Probably got to bulk up a little bit. Ron Holland, though, real quick. Ron Holland's stats were 19.5 points per game, 46% from the field, 24% from three-point range, 72.8% from free throw line, 6.7 rebounds, 2.9 assists per game, 2.3 steals, 0.9 blocks per game in 29 games. There was another player a few drafts ago who had this stat line here: 19.1 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 2.8 assists, 1.3 steals, 0.6 blocks per game. This player in his 1 year of college shot 50.4% from 2-point range, 29.4% from 3-point range, and then 77.2% from the free throw line. I mean, the point per game was pretty similar. This is in 32 games, and that stat line comes from Ant-Man Anthony Edwards.
Oh, wow.
So I'm not going to say like he's going to become the exact same player, but I mean, it's funny all the revisionist history now going on around about Ant, but everybody hated that draft as well, and they're like, I don't know, how this is going to work out. I don't know if he'll ever be a top guy or whatever. I think he's always going to be inefficient, and Ant has really morphed himself into this fantastic player. So that's what I would give for Ron's pitch of like, yo, man, like the stat profile is pretty similar. And Ron actually is a far better defender than Anthony Edwards is. I mean, Ron's like the best perimeter defender in this class, hands down. It's not even a question. Like, he will defend you the minute he wakes up. He loves playing defense, and he's always been super focused on that side of things. But the one more that I will add that I didn't really talk about here is Trajan Salon, international guy, playing with Shloe. He's about 6'9-ish, about 200, 215. I mean, he's incredibly raw. There are moments where you're like, bro has no idea what he's doing out there. But the movement skills and the ability to create for himself at that size. And he has some really good defensive flashes too. Like, he has one of the best closeout techniques I've seen from a young guy, where he doesn't jump that often, which is something you don't see a lot. I know this might be like draft nerd thing, but as like a 19, 20-year-old kid, think of how many get jump happy when they're doing that thing and, running out to a shooter.
Yep.
And at 6'9", 6'8", with those long limbs, like, that makes a big difference. His shooting slowly coming around. I can give you some stats on him in a minute. But, man, you just see that raw ability and athleticism at that size, producing in a professional league. He's another guy that I understand, being lost, and you're like, he never really played high level basketball with the French team like Risacher did or like Sar did. So it's like, okay, why wasn't he invited to them beforehand? Is he just kind of a late bloomer? I mean, he's probably the biggest like wild card in this draft, to where you could see in a couple years, you're like, oh my gosh, he's the best player in this draft class. Or you can see in like 2 years, like, oh my gosh, what were we thinking drafting this guy who doesn't know what to do? Trajan Salon this season for Schloe over in the French League, 54 games, 9.7 points per game, 40.6% from 2-point range or from the entire field, 31.6% from three on 4.4 3-point attempts per game, 74.8% from the free throw line, 2.7 rebounds, 3.9 rebounds, 0.9 assists, 1.1 steals per game, and then 0.2 blocks per game. To end on him, the spectrum I see for him is like Giannis and Poku, because this is that kind of player where you're sold. The numbers don't stand out, and you see the athleticism, and you're like, oh man, he can do a bunch of things that a guy his size doesn't normally do. I mean, we got that sell on Giannis, and that worked out, but we also got that sell on Poku, and unfortunately, just hasn't panned out. So he's another guy I think, like, I don't know that they'll really consider it 5, but yeah, fantastic ball of clay with enough patience and with the right development system. So it means it's probably not the Pistons, but lot to like about Trajan Salon.
I mean, I hear you, but man, what are the Pistons are 0 for 2 on French raw prospects. I think Sekou and Killian Hayes, and oh man,
well, Killian wasn't supposed to be raw, so this is like
true.
Another argument against Risacher.
True, but he still had a little bit of rawness to his game. I mean, I loved him. Don't get me wrong. I did love him when he was coming out, but I don't know why. I don't know why I keep I think to myself all the time where it could be a great player, it could be a can't miss, but I'm like, if he's from France, I have my doubts because he's coming to Detroit, and I don't know why that is.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like when you see it again and again and again, and it's just happened so many times, it's not illogical.
Yeah. So my answer is Ron Holland as well. I guess I could throw Cody Williams in there, and those would be my 2 guys that I would be afraid to pass on just because I do think they offer a lot. They can bring a lot to a team. And like I've said about Ron Holland, you put him with a point guard, maybe his shot does change. Maybe he hits them at a higher clip than he did for the G League Ignite, but he's not I don't worry about him offensively quite like I do Asar. I feel like offensively for Ron Holland, he's going to be able to figure it out versus Asar, he can do some things offensively, but Ron Holland, even though they're both at the moment questionable shooters, it just feels like Ron Holland can bring that more to that side of the ball than an Asar Thompson can. And I still really love Asar. So Ron Holland would be my answer. And Cody Williams is just, man, I mean, mainly a lot of it comes from watching Jalen Williams, but he does look like a legit 6'8" prospect, and I just really love his game and what he brings to a team. But those would be my 2 answers. Zach, who are you afraid to pass on? Who's your Donovan Mitchell of this draft?
All right, so this is going to be crazy, and I'm about to shake some stuff up real quick. So I do agree, obviously, with the Cody Williams and the Ron Holland. I think that's huge. I think those are guys that you can't miss. But I'll tell you right now, if we weren't in such a situation where we have our point guard of the future, we're so locked into having to draft around this guy to make this fit and so on and so forth. I really like Nikola Topic. I like his game. I like his game. I think he's a good. I watched all of his stuff. I think he's a great guard. I think he's 6'6", 6'5". I just like the way he plays. I like the way he can break down a defense. And with his size at the guard position, I think defending wise in the league, he can hold his own. But granted, he's only 18 years old. So I know that we're not looking for a point guard. We're not looking for that type of player for the Pistons. But when I watch this guy's tape, man, I only see good things with him at 18 years old. But then again, coming into the league and being coached by Imani Williams and put in this organization, he might not be the guy that we want him to be. And seeing him, if he got drafted to San Antonio, I think he could turn into something incredibly special in the NBA because I think he has a very, very high ceiling. Not saying that I would want to draft him at 5 just because of the situation that the Pistons are in. It's not something that we need. But man, I tell you, if our Cade Cunningham was our 3 or our 4 and we needed a guard, I fell in love watching this guy's highlights.
I do like that answer. I got a player comp for him. You ready for this one, Steve?
Oh my God.
Well, yeah, I think it's a pretty good one, and every time I watch him play, I just keep thinking of this guy. But
Don't make it a white European.
oh my, dude, whoa! I was going that way, and I'm still gonna share the name. He's from Serbia, but it's Marko Jaric. Like that's the guy that I don't know why I always go look at that guy. He was one of my favorites when I was a kid as well too. And yes, I did go with a white foreigner. So.
Serbian on Serbian comparison, countryman to countryman even.
Well, I mean, isn't it fair though that he could say like, "Hey, I probably watched this guy a little bit."
Yeah, I mean, a lot of
especially
a lot of European players, they'll name the EuroLeague stars and say like, "Oh, I was really into him," and molded my game after him. So, I mean, I could see it. I think that's selling him a little bit short. The comp that so many people want to give him is Goran Dragic, which I think is, even though again I hate like the complexion comparisons, especially like white European to white European player, but it makes the most sense. Like Goran took a while to figure out to shoot, and his main skill was getting to the rack and knowing how to pass better than everybody, which is what you see with Topic here. So yeah, I could see that.
I like the way he breaks down a defense. Like he's not the quickest off his first step, but it looks like he always knows where he's going with the ball. And that's what I feel like. Not that Cade doesn't do that. I just think that he could be a great setup man. Like I just like the way that he plays and the skill set he brings to the table.
I got another one for you. What about like a less athletic Dante Exum with like the terms of playmaking? Because I remember watching Dante Exum's tape, and I know that there was like some Penny Hardaway, but there were some passes he made, and I was like, man, dude, the dude really sees the floor. And I think that's obviously the skill set with Topic. So I don't know. What about a Dante Exum? I'm trying to get these on the
head that one's hard because I always remember Exum being sold as like this combo guard.
Yeah.
I think, with Topic, he's always been like, no, you need to keep the ball in his hands, where Exum was sold as like he can play with or without the ball. So yeah, that's the one. And honestly, like I have a really hard time remembering. I wasn't doing this, like full time and really into it. What the Exum like profile was back then.
I remember reading or watching. I think it was on draft night where they were comparing him to Penny Hardaway, and I'm like, whoa, geez, this guy's gonna be exciting. And he did have some flashy plays, but there was just some plays where like it looked like an extraordinary pass, but it was just finding the open man and, just seeing the play develop before other people. And that's kind of what I see with Topic. So
shout out Dante Exum though for resurrecting his career this year.
For real,
Dallas.
dude.
That's awesome.
Yes. Yeah, it was fun. Yeah, I think he was playing in Summer League, and I was like, this looks like a totally different player. He looks awesome. We got one final topic, and that is the prospect that would surprise you at number 5. And Steve, you're the guest. I'm gonna let you take it over on the final topic.
So it's Tyler Smith. I know the previous regime talked about getting a stretch 4. I don't know if this new regime would want it, but honestly, he might be the guy behind Reed Sheppard in terms of who fits the most. Tyler Smith, about 6'10", about 210, 215, somewhere in there, and played for the G League Ignite as well. 43 games. Tyler Smith played with the G League Ignite, 13.7 points per game, 48% from the entire field. 36% from 3 on 161 total threes the year, 73.2% from the free throw line, 5.1 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 0.8 steals per game, and then just under a block per game, 0.9. I mean, I think he fits what this team really needs. It's just that guy at the 4 that can stretch out, mainly shoot from 3. Tyler Smith kind of fell off later on into the year when teams in the G League started to realize hey, this is the only guy that can actually legitimately space the floor out on this team. So we need to start guarding him a little bit more. But I mean, he still maintained good efficiency. And with all the G League guys, even with Madas, we got to give him a little bit of a pass just because they were so bad. But I think Tyler's being slept on the most. And I just recently, again, listened to a Mavs draft and James Barlow, and James had him at 7. And he said that same thing. I think Tyler's being slept on the most, because he is the legitimate 6'10". He can actually stretch the floor, and he has more shot blocking chops to him. And when he was averaging 1.5 for a while, and then they kind of took him out of that role and put him out more in the perimeter there. But that's another guy that would surprise me, but the skill set works. And again, I wouldn't bet money on it. It would surprise me, even if I understand the fit and the reasoning why they would do it. And again, young kid, 19-year-old kid, you want to bet on the young upside dude.
So do you think that drafting Tyler Smith at 5 could be kind of like, I mean, I think Asar was the pick at number 5 anyways, but like when I think of Tyler Smith, I kind of think of Taylor Hendricks, who I liked that I liked last year's draft. Do you think like drafting Tyler, I mean, I guess it's not Troy Weaver, so that question doesn't really make any sense, but I was thinking like you draft Tyler Smith because you missed out on a Taylor Hendricks, who I thought coming into the draft made a lot of sense for the Pistons at number 5.
I don't think it's necessarily like you missed out, but you're trying to find the Asar and Cade complement. And the guy that can play with who you still have there, like, can he play with Duran? Yes, because he actually stretches out the floor and he doesn't need to operate down low in the same spaces where Duran does, either on offense or on defense. He could actually like come over on the weak side and block a shot, unlike Duran. Yes, that is shaded Duran. If you listen to my podcast, you know how much I break down Duran's lack of defense. Can he play with a Jaden Ivey and a Cade Cunningham? Yeah, because he can just run pick and pop with them, or he can run that driving kick with Ivey and stand in the corner and knock him down. Probably already a better shooter than an Isaiah Stewart. And hey, he can actually play with an Isaiah Stewart too, because he's bigger than Stu and can play the 5 there if they wanted to go that route. And again, Asar and Tyler Smith, both guys that came from the OTE development as well. And Asar, you wonder about the defense, or you wonder about the offense, but you love the defense. Tyler Smith, you kind of wonder about the defense, but you love the offense. Sounds like perfect compliments to each other.
It really does. So my surprise pick at 5, and I'm going with the Kentucky guard, it'd be Rob Dillingham. And I say surprise because I think there's a chance that the Pistons just kind of fall in love with him because of what Tyrese Maxey and Emmanuel Quickley are doing for the Sixers and the Toronto Raptors. Like Quickley looks like a pretty solid player for the Raptors right now. I think he's with the Raptors. He averaged 18, almost 19 points per game, 5 rebounds, almost 7 assists, and almost a full steal per game, while shooting 39.5% on 7 attempts from the 3-point line. I think there's a chance you just fall in love with a Kentucky guard because for the most part, they have made out in the NBA. And with Rob Dillingham's ability to create his own shot and just be a bucket, it does kind of make sense, even though he is a little undersized at like 6'1", 6'2", but Cade's 6'6", Simone Fontecchio 6'8". You know, you might bring in like a Nick Claxton, or maybe you stick with Jalen Duren, who's close to 7 foot, and then you can play Asar Thompson. You still have size around him that can make up for him like that, even though I know he's not the defender, but he's a guy that can just go out and get you a bucket, which is also something the Pistons need. But Zach, who's your surprise pick at number 5?
Surprise pick, the man, the myth, the legend, Bronny James Jr. at number 5. I'm totally just kidding. The guy that lied about all of his size and his weight at his combine. My surprise is not trading the pick. That's my surprise. If they don't move this, which I think they really need to do, because all the guys that we've talked about, I think, are all guys that can technically be reaches on. Like if you want to get the power forward and was it Tyler Smith? Like if you want to drop back, I feel like you could really drop back for that. And I think that could be a home run hit of a pick falling at like 15, 16, or 17. So that's my surprise. It's not a person. I mean, I take Bronny. That means we get his dad. Got 2 years out of him. Like, bucket. But I don't see them not moving this pick somewhere else, because it's a big reach for us because of all the things that we need as a 14-win team. I think that we can get more out of this draft because, like I told you, Lance, I think this draft, other than Alexander Sarr, I think everything is kind of mid together. Like all the talent is kind of equal to itself. All these guys bring like mid-tier talent and the things that they bring with their intangibles to whatever they do and what their skill set is. I just don't see anyone other than maybe Alexander Sarr being a peak player. So I think going back in this draft would be more of a win than anything.
Yeah, if I can jump in there too, like I think there's 7 guys at the top that you should take a chance on. And if you have the ability to take one of those 7, you should. But I also understand Zach's point here to where it just seems kind of like there's maybe 1 or 2 guys at the top that you feel like separate themselves. And then after that, it's fluid. After those 7 guys, though, like when I'm breaking down the big board, and I'm going to post it on rezball.substack.com soon. After those 7 guys, it's 15 dudes that to me are interchangeable. Like you could tell me the guy that I have at the bottom of that tier, you take them at number 8. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to argue with it at all because I think they're again, interchangeable, and then you could take them in any order, but they all at least like profile as like NBA starter potential things. And if you trade back, so we're talking about wings, they you just want to look at shoe like Keyshawn George, Pacom Dadier. Those are probably two names to look at. Dadier is somebody that raised up very late in the process, but he is a legitimate 6'8", like 200, 210, pretty good shooter. He's number one in terms of points per possession off of catch and shoot looks out of everybody in this draft. So he's got clear potential. I mean, he took a lot of usage for Ratio Farm Ulm over in the German league as well. I came from the same team as Killian, so sorry, people, if you have flashbacks about that as well. But I mean, 6'8" shooter, that's pretty athletic. Another French guy. So again, if you have the PTSD from that, apologies. Keyshawn George, 6'7", 6'8", 206 pounds out of the U, out of Miami. The numbers aren't going to wow you. He scored something like 7.6 points per game, but 64.7% free throw or 3-point attempt rate, over 40% from three. He came from a professional development system in Europe where he was a point guard. He had the ball in his hands, and then he grew up and, had that late bloom up in the 6'7" range. And I mean, he can already attack off the dribble. He will punish anybody that tries to go under a ball screen and shoot over the top. And then there's other dudes like Johnny Furphy, Cam Christie, Jalen Tyson, Melvin Aginsa, if you want to go down. I mean, this is also the like you said, the Dalton Knecht. Yeah, I like trade back, get him and get an extra pick. That makes sense because of where the team is at. Where if you say at 5, you're like, you know what, like a Pacom Dadier, a Keyshawn George, there's really not that big of a difference for us in our evaluation between like taking a Cody or even taking a Reed Shepherd. Then yeah, that's probably a better route to go down.
So would you want the Pistons to try to get multiple picks in this draft, or would you be perfectly fine with them just drafting at 5 and calling it good for the draft? I mean, I know they have a second round pick, but if they could get another first round pick in this draft, is it worth it to try to do that in this draft?
So again, we've talked about it a little bit. Number one, it depends on what they do with Monty Williams.
Yeah.
Number two, it depends on what they do in free agency. Like the Ron Holland and the Cody Williams pick, those make perfect sense if you draft them and then you go out and sign like Buddy Hield, Gary Trent Jr., and I don't know, like Obi Toppin, like these dudes that all shoot, legitimate volume 40% from three or whatever. Then it's like, yeah, then you don't have to put the burden on that guy. Cade's already there. And the other part of it is it sucks because if you do keep all the young guys, Asar and Duran can't shoot. Ivey took a step back. Cade's an okay shooter, but you don't want to have to put all that burden on him. You want to bring back Fontecchio. Quentin Grimes is like the conversation none of us want to have because we don't really know what he is. We know what he is in theory, but we don't know how he factors into all this. Theoretically, you could have it to where Grimes and Fontecchio continue to be good shooters. You bring in everybody else. Say you sign like 3 free agents, 1 stretch big, 1 wing, maybe like 1 guard, and they all shoot really well from 3 and they shoot legitimate volume. Then you're set yourself up to draft somebody like that. I don't know if that's the route they go down. But if they can't do that, then the Ron Holland, Cody Williams pick, then you're probably better, trading back and loading up on like Pacom Dadier, Keyshawn George, Johnny Furphy, trying to get a couple different guys there. And then Monty, again, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, they just got to fire Monty. It doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. Do you really want to bring him back when he did so many bizarre things? And also, if you bring him back, you probably have to cater everything to what he wants, which means you're probably trading a young guy, which is bad. And I just don't see a world in which you bring him back and there's major improvements based on what he wants.
Yep. No, I keep thinking more and more about it too. I definitely want them to fire Monty. I was watching the Mind the Game podcast. I love when they break the X's and O's down, and JJ Redick was breaking down the Horns play that the Boston Celtics run with Derek White and how they get him going downhill off a screen from Porzingis or Al Horford or Luke Cornett after getting a screen from Jaylen Brown, and he cuts to the dunker spot. I'm like, dude, if we had something like that with like Jaden Ivey, like I'm all back on the train. Like getting him going downhill with his right hand.
We had that
2
with
dribbles
Grant.
at
They
the
used to
rim.
run that with Grant, and he would
Yeah.
pull up for those middies. But then when they got Ivy, they just never ran in.
Yeah, and I don't get it. Like trying to get him to use his athleticism to get to the rim. And I was talking to a high school basketball coach the other day for a little bit, and I was asking him, I'm like, you probably watch the Pistons a little differently than I do. You probably watch it like where you're figuring out all the X's and O's, and he's like, dude, I don't know what they're running when I'm watching them play. He's like, I'm only a high school basketball coach, but he's like, obviously I know X's and O's, but like I have no idea what Monty Williams is doing offensively with these guys. And he's like, I just think it's just a mess when I watch him. He's like, I cannot figure it out. He's like, there's no clear idea of what he's trying to run on that side of the ball. And man, it just makes me so mad because like I know fans really want Malik Monk, and I'm not trying to turn this into that podcast. And I do like Malik Monk, but like I think Jaden Ivey really has the same tools to do what he can do on a basketball floor as like a 6-man. It's just like I was telling you on your podcast, the Rez Ball Pod, like I just think there's a few things missing from his offensive bag for him really to be that type of complete 6-man. But
Yeah,
like,
and it takes a development coach.
Yes.
It doesn't take, the Monty coach. That's
yeah,
just
exactly. And I just think like, man, I know people love Malik Monk, but like Jaden Ivey can really do that. And I like that's kind of why I'm like, I'd be okay with them passing on Malik Monk as long as they bring someone in to help Jaden Ivey and get him in the right, play to his strengths. I think it'd be really beneficial. But I could talk to you for like a whole nother hour. I'm getting like really hyped for it as well, too. So I definitely got to have you back on the podcast. But Steve, tell everybody again where they can find you, and then I will share the poll results.
Yeah, real quick, if we have a little bit of time, I wanted to hear
Yep.
y'all's Donovan Clingan pitch because I think it seemed like you two were in on it, but you didn't really want to bring it up.
Well, my thing is, I just don't believe in Duran defensively. And I think, like, if you're only going to ask him to set screens and roll to the rim and catch lobs, Donovan Clingan can do those things. But also, he brings something to the defensive side that you're not getting from Jalen Duran. And again, maybe you can't play him 30 minutes right away, but I'm looking at him as like a 2-3 year investment where in that amount of time, he'll be able to grow with Cade and these guys. And plus the Cade factor, he elevates Biggs plays. Like he puts them in a position to where they look better. Like he did it with Wiseman. He did it with Marvin Bagley. He's done it with Isaiah Stewart and Jalen Duran. So I believe some of these bigs on this team, they look a little better because they're playing with a point guard like Cade Cunningham. And if you put Donovan Clingan and just what he can do offensively right now, even if he never stretches the floor, as long as he brings that defense to the table and he can just catch a ball and finish at the rim at like 62% at the bare minimum, I'm perfectly fine with trading Jalen Duran. So that's my pitch for Donovan Clingan.
I mean, I'm the same way with him. He just brings a different intangible than Jalen Duran does. I mean, he's more of that rim protector that we need. And I think that when it comes to finishing at the rim, I mean, he has more finesse than Jalen Duran does, other than just catching lobs and throwing it down. I mean, he can finish at the rim, whether it's laying it up with contact or it is dunking. That's the only reason like I fell in love with Donovan Clingan. And also he's a winner, dude. Back-to-back championships at UConn. Like I think that says a lot about somebody going and being on a successful team like that. So that's part of the reason. But I also really like Kyle Filipowski as well. As a big, like I do enjoy watching his game. I followed him throughout the tournament, helped me make some money on my bracket. Go Kyle Filipowski. Like I like the way that they play. And with Duran, I mean, I do love Jalen Duran. He killed it for me in fantasy basketball. Like he did a lot of good for me, but when it came to being a center to anchor and win games, he wasn't that guy for us. And I think he tried to overplay what he brought to the team, and that's what made him something that he wasn't. Like I just think he kind of reaches a little bit on what he wants to do or what we want him to do, and I think that's kind of how he fell off.
Yeah, I think that's just the thing is like you pretty much are forced to move during that at that point, or just be upfront and be like, hey, it's a competition now. We're going to see who's going to make the most impact or whatever. I'm much lower on Clingan than a lot of other people, but he's in that next tier for me where like if you want to take him at 8, that's totally fine. And I wouldn't love like taking him at 5, but he's somebody I couldn't hate on at 5 because there are a lot of positive indicators that he's just going to work. Statistically, who he lines up with the most in college is Daniel Gafford. pretty similar usage, like pretty similar game and blocks and stuff. But the more I watch of Klingan, like the big screens where he just eliminates people, like utilizing his size and being a bully, it reminds me more of Steven Adams.
Ooh.
And then a draft where you're, like at 5, like Steven Adams, if you can identify somebody that looks like Steven Adams, Daniel Gafford, you obviously take them. But those guys also are limiting, both in terms of health, which Donovan Clingan unfortunately has those concerns as well. He only played 30 minutes 4 times all year, so that's concerning. And again, Gafford works in tandem with Lively. They traded for him to play more minutes, but they also are not investing in him long term. And Steven Adams, you consistently saw like he limited whatever team he was on, whether it was from not stretching or not being able to slide his speed and be more of a switch defender. Like, yes, they're impactful, but it seems like there's a ceiling on it. And I just don't know what else Klingan would bring to the table that makes me feel like he's going to be a little bit more than Gafford or a little bit more than Adams. Because people try to make the Mark Williams comp or say like, Donovan Klingan can make the same impact as Walker Kessler. Like that needs to be thrown out the window. I mean, Mark Williams had more blocks in the regular season before the NCAA tournament than Donovan Klingan had all year. So not to say Donovan Klingan's bad. It's just, Mark Williams, Walker Kessler, they're different level of that. And those guys are rare. So again, Klingan, it's on the fence there of like, of course he's going to be good, but I think the Pistons are just at a point to where you're not bringing in Gafford or Steven Adams because that's kind of like the final piece to a roster, right? They're still at the point where they need to be swinging for the fences, and I just don't think Klingan's really swinging for the fences.
Do you look at success in college, like of guard play or big man play in general, like them, like UConn, like even Stephon Castle, like them winning back-to-back championships? Do you look at that as something that's like positive towards a draft stock going into the draft or no?
Not really, because I think that veers in the territory of like, I don't know what else to say or weird. I don't know how to put this, but there those weird things in the scouting community where like, well, he's just a winner. Like G.G. Jackson is the anti of this. Everybody last year was like, he's not a winner. He's pouting or whatever. And then there were people like Rafael Barlow or like myself that were like, he's 18 years old. Like, he's playing for one of the worst programs in the nation. And actually, if you spend time with him like Rafael did, he would report of like, this guy's entourage is his trainer, his dad, and his agent. Like that's it. So all of that, like he's not a winner, he's selfish stuff. Like it was untrue for G.G. Jackson. And I think a lot of times if you put too much of the focus on that kind of stuff, it can either like shy away from actual deficiencies, or it can also shy away from actual talent like it did with G.G.
Okay.
I was actually on record saying I wanted the Pistons to take a shot with G.G. Jackson.
Yeah, when they traded up that pick, I was like, oh, this is perfect G.G. spot. And then,
because I was like, dude, bad attitude aside or whatever the reports are, you sometimes have to forget about that and take a chance on a guy with immense
on the
talent.
6'9", 215 dude that runs around like a gazelle and
he
has
looked
a good
like
jump shot.
I mean, dude, at times he looked better than Brandon Miller, and Brandon Miller went number 2. So, I mean, I don't know why. Like, we took a chance on Josh Jackson at one point, who I thought was going to be pretty awesome in Detroit because I thought, man, he's getting another chance. But that was a guy that, he also had some question marks about his character, but they weren't willing to take another shot on an 18-year-old who, you already have like the good character guys set in place in Detroit with Cade, Isaiah Stewart, Jaden, Ivey. Like these guys are all just hard workers. They bring, their lunch pails to work. They have a great attitude. They're not complaining. So you'd already be surrounding a young guy with those high character guys. So I just thought they should have taken it.
Yeah, I mean, I'll do a whole podcast on this in the future. The intangible conversation is weird because it gets stuck to some guys. And some guys, like, it's created that they don't have intangibles because you'll see videos now. Just look up G.G. Jackson, like church drums. He plays the drums for his church.
Yeah.
And you see all these videos like of him, just being a good kid. And they've been out there for a while. And again, it's like, who started these reports? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I remember they were saying like he was smoking his vape during the tryouts or something. I'm like, I mean, dude, really? Like, I mean, okay, I don't know if this is true or not, but this is kind of crazy that I've never heard of a report like this about a player before, especially a guy that was like, I know he was projected to be a late round pick, but you knew he was going in the second round based
Man,
on that
Vlade
stuff.
Divac used to smoke a whole pack at halftime. Come on now.
Wasn't it Dino Raja too that would do that as well?
Yeah. I'm Don Nelly used to have like more beers than Gatorades in the cooler at practice.
Dude, I heard a crazy story about Clifford Robinson, how like after a game he's like, dude, you got to square. Like I need to relax. And
You got to relax, man. Come
yep.
on, as long as they show up to work, come on,
exactly.
it helps you.
Exactly. But Steve, tell everybody where they can find you.
So you can find me at Rez Ball Pod on X, Twitter, Zitter, whatever you want to call it these days. You can find me at Rez Ball Pod on Instagram as well. And Rez Ball, search it, Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, Stitcher, if that's still a thing out there, if you do use that. And then I do have a Substack too, rezball.substack.com, where I'm posting big boards. I didn't post as much this year, just busy with work and other things. But as we get near to the draft, I'm going to start posting my final big board in tiers. I will put out the first tier, hopefully this week, which is the top tier, picks 1 through 7, which I call in contention for a number 1 overall pick. Because I think any of these 7 guys could go number 1 overall. Most likely it's going to be Sarr. And the guy that I put at 7, is super outside shot, but still the way people talk about him and you see the game, you're like, okay, I could see that.
And I will drop all of that in the descriptions for all the podcasting platforms and on YouTube as well. And real quick, the results for the poll that I posted 40 minutes ago, 47 to be exact. Let me just hit refresh to see if we got a few more votes. And which prospect will you love the most at 5? Didn't get very many votes, but it's split between Dalton, Knecht, and Ron Holland. And one comment said, think from here on out, I'm going Dalton, Knecht. So I think it's Dalton, Knecht 2-1 to Ron Holland, but either way, Dalton, Knecht, I think he's leading that poll as of right now. But thank you guys for listening to the 3 Championship Drive podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and hit the follow button. After you hit the follow button, rate with 5 stars and tell us who you love the most at number 5. And more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.